All right, we are live. We're back with another preview. This time it is Purdue. They headed down to the Bahamas to take on Memphis. So the Boilermakers took a quick flight down to the Bahamas yesterday, I believe. They're currently getting ready for their matchup with Memphis. It's a Memphis team that so far has had kind of, I'd say, an interesting start to their season. They opened their year with a win over a really good mid-major in San Francisco, and followed it up with a loss to Mississippi, and then a very puzzling UNLV loss. And not really sure what to make of Memphis at the moment, but we will definitely talk through that with you guys. And yeah, I'll throw it to Ethan first to kind of get his initial thoughts on this matchup for Purdue.
Yeah, I think it just kind of comes back to this Memphis team isn't very good. Um, you look at their team sheet; they don't do a ton great relative to how good Memphis has been in the past. Like right now, they're the equivalent of like a pretty solid mid major. Memphis historically is much better than that, and even in recent years, they've been much better than. They're a 5 seed last year. They're just not the same team this year. And we can kind of break down stylistically what they're going to pose to Purdue, but ultimately, I think that's the takeaway here, kind of heading into this game. Is this is a game Purdue should win comfortably, um, and there isn't a whole lot Memphis does that should cause Purdue problems. Unlike the last two games we played against Alabama and Akron, where stylistically there's some ways they can attack Purdue. I just don't really think Memphis has that advantage in this matchup.
Yeah, I think they're actually kind of similar to Akron. They're rated pretty similarly on Ken Palm, and they start a couple of score first smaller guards, and I think the matchup is actually going to be somewhat similar stylistically. However, I think Akron might just be better than Memphis, which like I wasn't sure about that going into the year, but I feel pretty confident about that now. I think Akron's going to be a better version of what this Memphis team is, and quite honestly, with the starting lineup of kind of playing Doug McDaniel, Sincere Parker, like that's two smaller guards that really score first, really are looking to kind of get their own shot. And, Sincere Parker's had a pretty efficient start to the year, but I think, if you look back through his kind of seasons, he's not the most efficient shooter. He had 1 year over 40%, but it was by far his lowest attempts. Last year at McNeese State, he shot 30% on like 120 attempts last year. So he's had a good start, but I'll be interested to see how Purdue guards him, if they really respect the jumper going in early, or if they're kind of willing to let him take some of those tougher jumpers.
Yeah, Parker's a guy that Purdue fans should be a little bit familiar with. He was one of the engines of that McNeese team that we faced in the round of 32 last year. Had an absolutely fantastic game against Clemson in the first round. He is Memphis's best player right now. On paper coming into the year is supposed to be Doug McDaniel. Right now, it's pretty clearly Sincere Parker. He leads the team in points. He's tied for second on the team in rebounds. He is the best shooter on this team, or the most efficient shooter on this team, I should say, right now. And historically, he's not been inefficient the way you might describe like an inefficient like volume score, but he hasn't been super efficient in the past. So those numbers probably come down a little bit. He's only averaging 21 minutes a game compared to 35 for Doug McDaniel. So he's not quite the engine of this Memphis team, but I do think he's pretty clearly their best player. But let's talk about Doug McDaniel for a minute. He's a guy who's kind of bounced around the college basketball landscape in recent years. He was at Michigan for 2 years, putting up some great numbers in the last years of the Juwan Howard era before that weird academic suspension, the second half of his sophomore year, where he was only allowed to play home games due to some lagging grades. I guess the idea being like time it would take him to like travel with the team would take away
Shout
from.
out Jawan Howard, by the
Shout
way.
out
What
Juwan
a
Howard.
what a time in college basketball. We had Doug
Truly one of
McDaniel
the
being
most
ruled academically ineligible, and they're like, "F it, you can play the home games."
truly one of the most bizarre suspensions of all time. Like either suspend him or don't. Does he need to get his grades back on track or can he play basketball? Regardless, since then he just hasn't really been the same player. He was at Kansas State last year, um, next to Coleman Hawkins on a Kansas State team that really underperformed. And now he's on a Memphis team where, similar to Juwan Howard and Jerome Tang at Michigan and Kansas State, respectively, Penny Hardaway kind of needs some good years here to salvage his job. He had a good season last year and as a 5 seed in the NCAA tournament, lost in the first round. Memphis hasn't made the Sweet 16 in quite some time. I mean, his best team in recent years, probably the Jalen Duren team that gave number 1 seed Gonzaga absolute hell in the round of 32, like 3 or 4 years ago, whenever that was.
Yeah.
But like even that team didn't like underperform during the regular season, and as a result, got stuck against Gonzaga in the second round and couldn't advance. So
Was that the Amani Bates team?
it was, yeah.
I believe they played. Are you sure they played? Was it Gonzaga? Or they play Alabama in the first round or the second round that year? Because I
That was
believe that was
Gonzaga.
it
That
was
was Drew.
Gonzaga.
It was Drew Timmy versus Jalen Duren.
You're right. You're right. That was a fun game because I feel like
That was a fun game, yeah.
that was a really fun game. I almost forgot about that tournament game. Man, there's a lot of we need to do an episode after the season ends, reminiscing on some of our favorite random tournament games. But I'll let you get back on
Absolutely.
track before I high skew you too far away.
Yeah, that was a fun one to watch. As I had it up on a laptop, I was helping a friend unpack after spring break. It was just a fun game. But yeah, back to the point at hand here. Penny Hardaway kind of in a do or die moment for his coaching career. I don't think he's necessarily a guaranteed ousting after this season or anything. But he's going to have an uphill battle to get this team to be a tournament team this year. And that kind of transitions nicely into the front court because while Memphis has some fun guards who, while largely inefficient, underwhelming, can all kind of go off at any given moment and give you 25. Between Sincere Parker, Curtis Gibbons, and Doug McDaniel, that's a pretty fun backcourt. In the front court, they just don't have the guys. Aaron Bradshaw was brought in as like the number 2 to McDaniel's number 1, supposed to be like the 1-2 punch in this Memphis offense. He's been benched. They only played 10 minutes in their last game. Purdue fans, if you aren't aware, if you aren't familiar with Bradshaw, he was a McDonald's All-American, super highly touted recruit to Kentucky 2 years ago, and started a chunk of the season on Coach Calipari's last Kentucky team, the one that made a lot of noise in the SEC, ultimately got a 3 seed and then lost to Oakland in the first round. He was at Ohio State last year, and again, an underwhelming season from Bradshaw. He was serviceable in a backup role, but he did not look like the top build guy at all that he was sort of supposed to be as like a Jake Diebler's like big time recruiting transfer portal win to like upgrade the front court next to Bruce Thornton in the backcourt. And now he was brought in on a Memphis team that needs bodies in the front court and seemingly can't play at this level either. So Purdue should have a massive advantage in the front court. If Bradshaw's coming off the bench, he's a legit 7-footer, and say what you want about his play. Like, he at least has the size to battle with the likes of Daniel Jacobson and Oscar Clough. No one else on this team does. Ashton Hardaway, I assume Penny's son.
It is Penny's son. I did just fact check that. But it
Yeah.
is, yes.
It'd be kind of crazy if it wasn't.
Crazy enough, he did transfer out of the program for a year. He started at Memphis at 24, transferred to St. Mary's last year, and then came back to Memphis, which is probably the most Memphis Penny Hardaway way that his son could have handled that situation, I think. I don't know the ins and outs or anything, but that seems like the most Memphis way to handle that whole situation.
Yeah. He's playing a lot of minutes now. He's up to 20 minutes a game. Simon Majak, he's only playing 10 minutes a game. Bradshaw's at 12 again. He only played 10 minutes a game last year. And then Thierno Silla at 18. So I think Purdue's probably going to see a lot of Silla and Hardaway in the front court. But they rotate a lot of bodies. No one really plays more than 20 minutes in the front court. It's going to be very much like Akron, like you said, stylistically, where they just don't have a ton of size or presence in the front court. And if Purdue wants to win the rebounding battle by 20 again, they absolutely could do that.
Yeah, I think the difference between Akron and Memphis's front court is that, like, even though Akron's front court was small, there were some things that they did pretty well. Like, I really liked Amani Lyles. I think he's a really good player. This is kind of like the third try for school with Aaron Bradshaw where they think they're bringing in this like featured type player that they can start at the 5 and play big minutes there, and it just hasn't worked out like anywhere. And I think at this point, like I don't think it's fair to expect like a bounce back or kind of a jump for him, because I think at this point he just kind of is what he is.
Yeah.
Kentucky expected him to be a big part of that team, and in my opinion, he was kind of one of the bigger reasons why that team just wasn't that good, like wasn't that complete and had a lot of holes, is because there were some glaring issues inside with that Kentucky team. I think the same can be said about last year's Ohio State team that I think featured a really, really fun and exciting backcourt. I don't think like Bruce Thornton and John Mobley were the issues at Ohio State. And it's not fair to put it all on Aaron Bradshaw, but I think at his last two stops, like you look at both of those teams and you say, well, the front courts weren't very good and held those teams back, I think. And they both expected Aaron Bradshaw to be the starter and the main guy, which inherently says something about Aaron Bradshaw. And I think Memphis had the same idea. Bring him in. He's going to be our starter. He's going to play 25 to 30 minutes a game and be a good player for us and be impactful. And, very clearly, he just hasn't been. He just hasn't been that level. And I think that, if Aaron Bradshaw was meant to be the guy and it's just not working out, and they're searching for answers, this is not a front court you want to see if you're searching for answers, because I think that Trey Kaufman-Renn and Oscar Clough and Daniel Jacobson will really make you pay. I mean, you talked a little bit about the roster, like Thierno Silla is a senior, but Majok, which is probably going to be the first guy off the bench in the front court, I think, based on kind of how they've been handling Bradshaw. Maybe they go back to Bradshaw this game. I don't know. But if they go to a 7'1", 220-pound freshman, I think they're in trouble. Like I think Oscar Clough looks across and sees food. I think Trey Kaufman-Renn looks across and sees food. Uh, it's going to be an uphill battle for this Memphis front court for sure. On a team that I think has a backcourt that can stay competitive. I don't think they'll be able to outplay Purdue's backcourt, but I think the backcourt's good enough to stay competitive, especially if they start hitting a few shots. It's a pretty dynamic pairing, and with that dynamic pairing, with those guys, it's always kind of a question of whether or not they're going to hit shots. And I mean, if shots are falling for some of the more inefficient guards on this team, the ceiling I think gets raised a little bit, but this front court is just in such despair right now and disarray that I'm not sure what the plan even is going to be going into this Purdue game.
Yeah, let's transition to talking less specific personnel stuff and more stylistically, because like you said, I don't know what the game plan is against Purdue for Memphis. They don't defend the 3-point line well. Their interior defense is atrocious. They foul a ton inside. Like Trey Kaufman-Renn's going to shoot like 10 or 12 free throws in this game. They do pressure in the backcourt pretty effectively. They play aggressive defense and they get a lot of steals. They don't block a ton of shots, which makes sense. They don't have a strong interior presence. Just generally speaking, defensively, there's not a lot they can do against Purdue unless they're really able to speed Braden up and get him out of sorts. And it's obviously much easier said than done. And if they're really put a ton of pressure on Braden, get Omer in the game to relieve some of that pressure and to force them to play Braden a little bit more straight up when he's off ball. Like Purdue has answers for that style of defense now, and it's really the only thing Memphis can do to try and cause Purdue problems.
Yeah, I think this could be a game you see Omer have some success in, especially, the way that Memphis kind of runs their rotations. For the most part in the backcourt, it's going to be Doug McDaniel at the point. I mean, he plays 90% of their minutes at the point guard spot. So you're really not, I mean, it's very similar to Braden Smith, I think, a little bit in the sense that he plays the entire game. I think Omer can really use his size and have a lot of success this game. Doug is a very fun player. He's very quick and athletic, but he is only 5'11", 170. Like this could be a game you see Omer come in and just kind of be able to get to his spots and just shoot over the smaller Memphis guards. And, I don't know how much of that we'll see, just because obviously it's a Braden Smith team, so we're gonna see a lot of Braden Smith. Like that's just the reality. But I think some of Purdue's bigger guards could find themselves having a pretty good game this tomorrow, just purely off the idea that these are guys that are gonna be able to shoot over these smaller Memphis guards.
Yeah, I mean, they're Memphis causes havoc in the backcourt, but they're not great positional defenders. They're not going to be locking guys out on the perimeter. This isn't like a Houston type of team. Obviously, comparing anyone to Houston defensively is just not, no one's Houston. But if you remember the Houston game last year, they weren't causing a ton of turnovers. They weren't like they were playing aggressive and they were guarding Braden closely, but they were trying to force him to play straight up. We're not going to give you anything easy. And he was able to carve up that defense to fairly effectively, but obviously not effectively enough to win the game. And that's how Houston wants to play defense. A team like Memphis is a little bit the opposite. They're going to give up some stuff. If Braden's able to handle the pressure, there's going to be open guys. There's going to be passes they can make. They're going to be leaving guys along the corners. They're going to be playing one-on-one in the post and getting absolutely torched by whoever's there, even Daniel Jacobson. So their hope lies on offense, where they also just don't have a ton that I think can cause Purdue's defense problems, which is maybe the first time we're going to be saying this on a preview since the Evansville game in the opener. They're just a super inefficient shooting team. They only shoot 32% from three. They shoot 48% from two, which somehow ranks worse nationally than their three-point percentage. They have guys that get downhill well. They get to the line at a decent rate, but they just don't shoot efficiently. So will, Curtis Givens and Doug McDaniel and
Sincere Parker.
Sincere Parker, thank you. Will those three be able to get into the paint and get some shots up? Absolutely. They do that against everybody. Purdue's job on the perimeter is just going to be don't give them anything easy. Don't let them get to the line, which is what they're going to want to try and do, draw fouls. If they're going to show you a bunch of pull-up threes, let them. Don't overplay it. Because what they're going to try and do is have you overcommit on defense and get into the lane and try and hit a floater or get to the rim and make a layup. And if you make those two tough and rebound well, this is the kind of team that plays perfectly into what Purdue wants to do on defense, which is exactly that. Purdue wants to take away the three-point shot, and they want to force tough twos away from the rim. And Memphis is far too eager to take those shots, especially when they can't get other ones easily. So if they're going to take contested threes or pull-up twos and they start making them, you live with that because eventually they won't.
Yeah, I mean, really, when you look at this team's kind of roster build, I think it makes sense that they don't shoot very well. Like, they have 3 inefficient shooting guards who are all undersized. Like, are we shocked that 5'11", 170-pound Doug McDaniel isn't a great rim finisher? Like, yeah, he's great at getting there, but if you push Doug McDaniel into the paint and you get him trying to go up and finish over 7-foot tall Oscar Clough or 7'4" Daniel Jacobson, like I think that's where you see those kind of inefficient numbers coming into play. And so, sorry, excuse me. Purdue's ability to play defense without fouling, I think, is going to come through here, and obviously it's something that Painter really preaches and something that Purdue's been very elite at the last couple of years is playing defense without fouling. And I think that this kind of contrast in styles is going to really play nicely into Purdue's hands, I think. I'm not sure there's anything that this Memphis team does really besides create penetration from the guard spot that really worries me from the Purdue perspective. And even the penetration from the guards, like, I don't know, I'm kind of willing to live with Doug and Sincere Parker and Curtis Givens trying to finish through contact and finish over a lot of size and length at the rim. This feels like a group of guys that struggles to finish over elite size and struggles to finish with elite athleticism. So I would like to see Purdue kind of flex their muscles a little bit on the inside and win the rebounding battle as well. This is a Memphis team that really doesn't, I don't believe, rebounds. Oh, they do rebound the ball particularly pretty well. That's one of the things they do fairly well is they do rebound the ball somewhat well. And so this is a good test for Purdue to kind of force those tough twos, and then if this team truly has taken the rebounding jump, dominate a kind of lesser front court on the glass. And if that happens, I think Memphis really, really struggles in this game.
Yeah, and with that, let's transition to the preview or the prediction portion of this preview. Uh, Ken Palm has this a 13-point win for Purdue, 87-74. The betting lines likely won't be up till tomorrow, so we'll go off the Ken Palm projection here. Who are you taking?
I'm gonna take Purdue, and I think I'm gonna take them. I'm gonna have them cover. I think this game gets over 20. I think this is a Purdue team that's going to come out intentional. I think you might see some guys get a little bit of rest with the back to back coming. If they do win this game, you're probably going to have to see Texas Tech tomorrow night or the next night, excuse me. And so I think that this could be another one of those situations like Akron where you see this game get up to 26, and then Braden comes out and Akron's able to cut it down to 18. And this time instead it's Doug McDaniel scoring on Aaron Fine to cut the lead to 18 with 14 seconds left. Like, I think that's kind of the realistic pathway I see this going. However, it wouldn't shock me if like Memphis completely imploded if they get down by like 15 and it just turns into like a 30-point game and it stays there. That wouldn't shock me. But this is kind of the first game that we've gone into where I've been like, I legitimately don't know what this Akron team has or not Akron, excuse me, this Memphis team has for Purdue. This is kind of even more of a nightmare matchup than I think any team previously.
I'm with you completely. I'm taking Purdue to cover pretty comfortably in this game. Unlike the Akron game where I was like, if it gets up to 20, like maybe fade Purdue in that case, maybe slide some money on Akron. Give me a 20 like alt line of 20 and give me Purdue in that. I think Purdue's going to get up early in this game. The only way Memphis can keep it close is with some hot shooting, and I just don't think they're going to get the shots, like good looks, consistently enough to keep that up and sustain that over the course of a game. So,
yeah, I completely agree.
Purdue by like 20 or so. And yeah, that'll do it for us here. A little shorter than our typical previews. Just we're both a little under the weather right now, in case you didn't notice. So, we're gonna keep it moving here, but. We'll be back to recap that game when it's done and then preview the next matchup the following day, whether that's going to be against presumably Texas Tech, but potentially a pretty feisty Wake Forest team that looks maybe more fun than we thought it would be entering the season. So whether it's Texas Tech or Wake Forest, and regardless of the result of this game, we'll be back to break it all down for you. So stay tuned.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone. Sorry about it being a little shorter. Probably nice for a preview to not be 35 minutes for once, but yeah, we're both feeling a little sick, so it'll be nice to kind of sit on the couch and watch this pregame tomorrow and not really worry about having to go anywhere or anything like that. And we'll probably recap it right after. So stay tuned for that. It will be up pretty quick just because of that quick turnaround. So thanks for listening, everyone.